Hello, I'm Gina Fitt, and you've either surfed to or purposely selected Life Talk with Bern Moses. Welcome to another show in our series of ongoing presentations brought to you in this television format, as we explore the subject matter from the mind and heart of Bern Moses. Now, Bern, the reason I say that is because last week we were discussing a marvelous story, and you were talking about a wheelbarrow and people trudging along, pushing wheelbarrows full of past...
Yeah, that deserves review.
Yes.
Because I think we were hurried and people yelling at us to get off the air. So, no, years ago, for whatever reason, I began to imagine this horizonless field that I mentioned. And if you can imagine that, you know, the horizon is quicker than we closer than we normally think. But if you can imagine a horizonless field with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps a whole planet's population, okay, trudging along through a field, pushing a wheelbarrow. And they're up to their ankles, some to their shins, some to their knees in muck. And the muck represents what's not going on in their life today. Okay?
Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, you know, the stuff that happened today and yesterday, the impropriety, the impoliteness, you running late, just stuff that goes on in our lives that seem to occur.
Things that frustrate us and bog us down. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's the muck. That's what's going on.
The accumulation.
And these people are all pushing wheelbarrows. And those wheelbarrows have wheels on them that's sinking into the muck, as is their ankles and what have you. And these wheelbarrows are loaded with stuff, okay? And I've heard this illustration in the past with a bag burdened on the back, which is not that bad because at least you can see in front of you.
Right.
And what I perceive are people pushing these wheelbarrows, and the load is so great that as they're moving along, they can't see over the load, under it, or around it. In other words, it's right there in front of them. They're up to their ankles in the muck of life, which is not happening right now. And this stuff, by the way, this load is past hurt, pain, upset, misunderstanding, aggravation, the things that need to be kind of cleared out of our life if we're going to move forward. But can you imagine being there and being compelled to move forward, knowing it's probably going to get deeper and worse? Follow what I'm saying?
And not even being able to see what's going to happen.
Tough position to be in, which I would certainly put it in the category of someone grasping their way through life, holding on, doing the best they can, as opposed to having a clear way, which we had discussed, and we'll have to go back and do that some other time. What I wanted to do is to find ways to empty the wheelbarrow, okay, to get clear. In other words, if we can get rid of all this stuff, there may be a point where we can even take one additional step, and that's get rid of the wheelbarrow. And make up our mind we're not going to carry this stuff around anymore. We're not going to hold on to it. Now, this doesn't disappear. This doesn't disappear. We have developed over the years a process of reperceiving, in other words, making something worthwhile out of those experiences. Therefore, they can be stuffed into the muck, if you would, and firming up that ground so that now we have someone standing here without a wheelbarrow on firm footing. How much more pleasant, how much more productive, how much more effective can that life be than this one?
Absolutely.
No question.
That's an interesting concept. Now, and you're saying you have a way to do that.
Yeah, there's 4 steps to recapturing our authority. Okay. 4 principal steps that we've kind of defined over there. One of them is kind of Pollyannish on the surface, and that is to develop an attitude of gratitude. An attitude of gratitude. Gratitude, T-U-D-E. Okay? Now that's cute. It flips off the tongue comfortably, but attitude of gratitude. In other words, it's taking time out, for example, when you wake up in the morning to go, wow, I don't care what's going on. As long as there's not a chalk line around your body, you got a chance. You know what I mean? To make it a good day.
So there's always something to be grateful for.
Exactly. In other words, wow, what a beautiful day. Wow, it's raining out. You know what I mean? Whatever it happens to be, to take a moment to celebrate the fact that you're here and that you have time and capacity at your access. Okay?
It seems like as little children we do that more frequently than as adults. I remember being 5 and 6 and being so excited to wake up in the morning just to go downstairs and go outside and see if the flowers had grown overnight and stick my feet in the bare grass and feel the dew coming up through my toes.
And being aware of it. Being aware that you were enjoying.
And just having this incredible excitement for something as simple as that.
That's great. I think a lot of times people say gratitude. I mean, come on. I mean, I hit Thanksgiving and I can't decide what I'm going to be thankful for.
Yes.
And that's unfortunate, because there's a lot of things to be gratified about, and that is the fact that we can see. There are those who can't. We can hear, and there are those who can't. We can walk and talk, and we can dream and imagine and make plans and make choices and decisions. I mean, all of that's a wow. There's no question. But an attitude of gratitude. However, there is an exercise that I'm going to prescribe that I would plea, beg, urge, encourage, endorse people to act on right away. Now, I don't know what time of day you're watching this show. You may have time this evening, or perhaps tomorrow, to dash down to Hallmark, or maybe Kmart. It doesn't make any difference. And actually buy 30 thank you cards.
Really?
This is a little exercise. 30 thank you cards. Now, I would prefer and recommend that you not buy the kind that say thank you on them. You ought to be able to handle that by yourself. You know what I mean? In other words, to be able to write your own thank you. There could be a little graphic on it, perhaps, that might reflect some gratitude. But I would say 30 blank cards. And then go over and buy your stamps. You know, it's 30, 32-cent stamps. And make a commitment to write one thank you note a day for 30 days. One thank you note a day for 30 days. Now, it doesn't count, you know, if you save up and write 6 on Saturday. I'm talking about one a day for 30 days, and with the commitment that if you miss a day, you got to start over.
From one.
Right. So that's the only way this is really going to work.
So that you're really getting in the habit of thinking about the things you're grateful for each day.
See, here's the thing. I've done this all over the country. And I'm not surprised anymore when I say I'd like to have you review your past and come up with your thank you notes. And those, when was the last thank you note you got? Not a bread and butter note. In other words, you had someone over for dinner and they send you a bread and butter note. They're supposed to do that.
A requirement, right. Yeah. It's not spontaneous.
Or, yeah, you send a birthday gift or an anniversary gift or a Christmas gift and they send you a thank you. That doesn't count. I'm talking about when's the last time you got a thank you note from someone just for being kind, patient, loving, attentive, supportive, whatever that happens to be. A lot of people have never received one. Never received one, and I think that's heartbreaking because you know everyone has contributed something to someone sometime, and it hasn't been acknowledged.
But you do know they've certainly been told all the things they've done wrong.
Oh, yes, exactly. When is your last thank you note, Gina? No, it was the thank you note that you got that would qualify by this thing.
That I've received? Boy, it's probably been a long time.
Can you remember one? Seriously?
I can remember one. It was about 8 years ago.
Okay. And if you don't mind, if it's not too intimate, what was that about?
I had a friend who was going through some real difficult times, and I went over to see her regularly and encouraged her and took her little gifts, you know, cookies and a plant and some things like that. And she was moving and leaving town, and she wrote me a note and just said, "You have been the best friend I've had, and thank you for your support."
Okay, let's review that experience. The note comes in the mail, perhaps. Did she mail it to you?
Yes, she mailed it to me.
It comes in the mail, however you get your mail. And there's this odd-shaped envelope, probably not a number 10 business.
And it's a different color.
Right, different color. Maybe a fleeting moment, oh my gosh, an invitation, I'm going to have to spend some money. I don't know. Sometimes that comes up.
Right.
You open up the envelope, and there is this note, this thank you note for being kind, gracious, or sensitive. And that feels pretty good. How did it feel?
It felt wonderful.
Yeah.
It was a gift.
Exactly.
Of herself to me. It was wonderful.
You read the note, and chances are you're gratified by it, and you show it to someone else. I'll bet you showed it to somebody else.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 people.
And
then you threw it away.
Oh, no.
No, I don't think so.
I put it up on my bulletin board.
Yes, and I'll bet you...
I still have it up, Bern. 8 years later, I still have it up.
Do you truly?
Yes, I do.
That is not uncommon. I have been in homes where I had sent thank you notes 2 and 3 years prior, had occasion to perhaps to ask to use the facility, and they directed me down the hall. And you know, your eye tends to dart whether you like it or not. And I saw a thank you note framed one time on a bedroom wall, and I was truly touched. Didn't mention it, but I mean, I knew that it had some significance to those people. I've seen them propped up on televisions that were weeks and months old, and I know my own experiences, that I've had my share of them. And you know, I travel a lot, or have in the past, very nomadic in my life. And you're carting the stuff from one place to the other. And I remember a couple of occasions where I would sit down and say, look, I got to cull these files. This is ridiculous. And so I'd go into those files and I'd try to decide what I wanted to get rid of. And I couldn't find a single note that I wanted to discard. As a matter of fact, whenever you're feeling a little in doubt about what you're doing or who you are or whether this is all worthwhile, you know, we have those days. Anybody say they don't, I wonder what else
Everyone
they lie
does.
about. Yeah. But anyway, I'd go to those files now and I can go through them, and I think you said it a moment ago, someone at some point in time recognized that you were meaningful to them and acknowledged it. And I mean, it's really reinforcing. There's no question it can really elevate your attitude. Terribly, terribly important. I can imagine people, you know, if you live long enough, you're not going to have anything. That's the way the system is set up.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, say, a 90-year-old person lying in bed with a little box of personal effects by the side, and perhaps a shaky, you know, veined hand reaching out and reading that note one more time, perhaps for the 100th time, through dim, tear-filled eyes, you know what I mean, Sam? And appreciating it. It's more valuable than any gift. Certainly more valuable than a spoken word, which disappears into the ether. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The thank you note is the most powerful, powerful thing, and people deserve them more. But the thing of it is, if we can do so much with so little time and effort, we need to get serious and we need to start on this project. Besides, the real beneficiary of this, the real beneficiary, I believe, I know, is the sender. The sender. Here's the thing. Anyone can sit down and make a short list. You know, look back in your past and say, okay, who really deserved one? A teacher, a parent, an old neighbor, a sister, a sibling, you know, whatever it happens to be. In other words, and did you really send a thank you note, or did you take it for granted or say thank you? But did you send the note? And go back and pick up a few of those. Do some investigatory work, find an address, and send out those thank you notes. And the older, the better. When they get them, they'll be real impactful, you can imagine. Then, if you know you're going to send a thank you note every day, you might run out in a few days. And if you can't think of anybody, pick almost anybody. George, thanks. And sign it Gina. And when George gets it, he'll know what it's for. You know, we've all...
You've done something.
Yeah, we've done something. But I'm being a little facetious, but not too. Now, the real key, though, is that if you know you're going to send a thank you note tonight, what do you start looking for?
Things that you appreciate.
Yeah, you kind of begin to look around and say, who am I going to send my thank you note? And you will find your world filled with gratuities, filled with them. It's kind of like putting on a rose-colored glass. You know what I mean? You say, wow, what a place we have here. Because you find what you look for. It's kind of like the two birds flying over the desert. Have we discussed this?
No, I don't think we have.
Yeah, one bird sees nothing but decay and carrion, you know, and the other bird sees nothing but flowers. One bird's a vulture, the other's a hummingbird. Same desert. You know, the same scenery, but each one is seeing exactly what they're looking for. Follow what I'm saying?
Right.
And this is true here. You see, we live in a place where we're really kind of fear-filled, anxious about crime, very cautious, over-aware. And the truth of the matter is that for every crime in this city, we know, I had a mathematician work on this some 4 years ago, and he came up with, for every crime, there's at least 186,000 non-crimes. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, we get real caught up in this, and we sometimes we encase ourselves inside of barriered homes, you know, where we can't even get out if it sets on fire. And the biggest prison of all is the one we create with our mind.
Absolutely.
By looking out and being fearful. And I think it's tragic. Oh, I don't mean to be ignorant about it. I mean, you don't want to be like a mosquito that lands on the back of a man's hand and gets whacked. But you know what I mean? At the same time, to not be so fear-filled and to look for the gratuities in our life. Now, there's some suggestions on this. Send a note a day. If there's a really big one, someone really did something truly worthwhile, save it up for a while. For example, here about 2 years ago, I sent I'm going to go back further than that. About 12 years ago, I sent a thank you note that was 27 years overdue. It was to a man named Bill Charnquist. He was a fuller brush man. I had worked with him and learned so much from him about nobility, about punctuality, about accountability. I mean, he was an incredible guy. You know, normally you think of a fuller brush man eking out a little supplemental income to his Social Security. This was not Bill Jarnquist. This was a professional. He had had this territory in Corpus Christi, Texas for 18 years, had a new car every year, had a beautiful home, put 2 kids through college, and perhaps the most important thing about Bill is that his whole family adored him. I mean, this was a special guy.
Wow.
And I sent him a thank you note, no return address, and several weeks later, I don't know how he found me, but I got a note back, and I've tried to read it in seminar to let people know how meaningful these things can be, but I could never get all the way through it. I mean, I get kind of choked up, and I finally gave up. The only thank you note he ever got, and that's not fair, because he deserved a lot more. And I don't even know he's alive now, and just talking about it, I think I'm going to go home and maybe find out if he's still living, and maybe send him another one, because it meant so much to him. Let's see, a year ago, this past summer, almost 2 years ago, I wrote a 47-year overdue thank you note to my high school coach. And he didn't respond, but I heard second party that he was really touched by it. But you imagine 47 years old, and it was hardly a day went by when I haven't thought of him and related to some of the things that I learned from him. And it was pretty awesome. Powerful, powerful exercise. We do know this, that when you do it, you begin to take on a whole new perspective. You begin to recapture your authority, and your esteem certainly is elevated. And this is what this really, really is all about. So will you do that?
Absolutely.
Please.
Absolutely.
And I'd to get a report here in a few weeks about what that feels like. There is another problem that comes up. In about 20 to 22 days, you're going to have another situation that's going to be a challenge, and that is, who am I going to send my thank you note to? They say when Jack Benny died, he was sending about 22 thank you notes a day. He was acknowledging people in his life for their,
And
for
how
their
long
courtesy.
did you do that?
Oh, I gather for some years.
Oh my goodness.
How'd you like to have one of those in your archive? A thank you note from Jack
wonderful?
Benny. Yeah, I didn't have the occasion, but yeah, but he had the time evidently. But what I'm saying is, pick out that one a day, and certainly it doesn't mean you can't pick one up later if you want to. But don't get caught in trying to send 15 or 20 notes a day, because that's the kind of world you live in after a while. The other day, I had a real estate broker. This is about a year or so ago. I called on him, and this, grizzled old real estate broker, had sent a thank you note to someone, and they hadn't acknowledged the receipt of it. And he was confused and concerned. He didn't know whether she had gotten it, or whether he should ask her if she'd gotten it, because that's inappropriate somehow. He was afraid he might have offended. I mean, he just
concerned.
Yeah. And one day he was at her office, and they were doing business, and she had occasion to get up and move from the desk. And when she did, she hit her day timer, and it kind of jarred it a little bit. And out of the side poked a corner of an envelope, and Corky recognized. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, this man recognized that it was his thank you note, and he was touched by the fact that the woman had carried it. And there was a business associate for all this time. You wouldn't expect that man to have that kind of attitude about it, to be that sensitized by it, but that's exactly the way these things work. And so, please, an attitude of gratitude begins to empty the wheelbarrow, begins to give you a different perspective on your life and your world, there's no question.
Now, since we didn't really touch on this at the beginning of the show, I think it's important to just let our viewers know that we are continuing a discussion from last week, and we're talking about command commission, which implies having authority in your life to choose each day what your life is going to be about, and what's going to be in your life and what isn't.
For years now, I've been contending, I'm certain, that you and I are in command of the direction our life is taking. It's whether we understand that or not that makes the difference, and whether we accept the authority that's implied in that command or not that makes a difference. And at the same time, whether we assume the responsibility that attends all authority or not. So it's about acknowledging and accepting, celebrating, and then assuming. And all of these things are designed to help us in that direction. Attitude of gratitude is one of the ways. Another way, it's kind of interesting, is to have a lot of completions in your life. Just completions. I have known people who, when they examined their lives carefully, could acknowledge a lot of incompletes. Ideas never acted on, projects started but never finished. It goes on and on. I have a young man in my life who said his whole family was an incomplete. In other words, newspapers unfinished, You know what I mean?
Yes.
Stacks of garbage prepared to throw away and never got thrown away. Partially dug holes with rusty shovels sitting beside them. You know, there were going to be a pool or whatever. And it's just a whole existence. A lot of completions. People who have a lot of incompletes in their life may have problem with death and dying.
Really?
Now, there seems to be some correlation. Because to the subconscious mind, a completion is an ending, and it's uncomfortable with it, and so it tends to continue. It's almost a libidinous kind of a thing. But the thing of it is, in order to have a lot of completions, you got to make a lot of commitments. Now, and when we did strategizing some weeks ago, remember we talked about commitments and
Yes,
how
we
to
did.
make those effectively. But commitments don't have to be great things. You know, they can be little, tiny, incremental commitments that we make, that we have a measurable finishing point. And when we do that, whenever we can complete something, we're empowered. And we begin to recapture our authority. Even if it's a single phone call that we take record for. You know what I mean? We mark it down. In other words, if, say for example, we want to make 20 calls a day, we're a whole lot more likely to make the 20 calls if we make one and take credit. Make 2 and take credit. You're more likely to do 20 that way. Follow what I'm saying? Because each completion creates energy. It opens up a new pathway in our mind as, okay, I'm going to complete that. But a lot of completions begins to recapture authority. The other thing, we talked about this briefly last week, that in life experiences, to acknowledge what's happened, okay? Just take a look at what's happened and accept it.
That's sometimes difficult to do, Brian.
Yeah, it's just terrible. I think one of the things that we have to talk about here and spend a little bit of time on is the acknowledgement and acceptance of some very important truths. Now, I've talked to people who said that you and I are perfect just the way we are. And I've always had trouble with that one, because I know that every single person I've ever encountered could be a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Or sometimes a lot better.
Yes,
and you certainly feel that way about yourself.
Exactly.
Probably more than what anyone else, how anyone else would judge you. You feel
Exactly.
and notice all your imperfections.
There is something, though, that we have to acknowledge and accept. And this is the tricky part. And it takes some practice, and you got to get kind of cognitive about it. But that you and I, and our viewers, and every person on the planet, regardless of circumstances, at any given moment in time, is doing the very best they could based on their experiences up to that point in time. Just the very best they could do at that moment. For example, remember last week we were talking about this lady Charlene?
Yes.
This was not who this lady was. Follow what I'm saying? This was a gracious, kind, a mother, neighbor, contributive, co-worker, a delightful person. And one day there was a near miss in a traffic mishap.
Yes.
And she lost it. Okay? And she chased that lady. Remember we talked about last week? And I mean, really could have gotten herself in a lot of trouble. And yet, at that point in time, that was the best she could do based on her accumulation of experiences up to that point. And what I'm saying is we have to understand that about ourselves and about each other in order to be able to accept people in a different way. There's something amiss in our society, in our penal system, for example. I mean, that's not working. That is not working. So many people are where they are because of a flash, just a moment. I don't know if I mentioned it on an earlier show or not, but when I was in high school, I had one incredibly inappropriate moment where I threw someone out of a window. In fact, it was a couple stories up. It was a culmination of 9 years of teasing and mocking and mimicking the fact that I stuttered. And one day something snapped inside of me. Prior to that, I'd laughed it off and kind of went with it.
Yeah.
Thought I was managing it, but I was holding on to something. And one day that happened in English class, and I just decided, something in my mind said, no more, never again, and I attacked. And I mean, it was pretty bad. And then I ran down 2 flights of stairs to get to this guy again and hurt him some more until he dragged me off. And in an instant, I was remorseful. I had no idea why I reacted that way, and my whole life could have been ruined.
Yes, absolutely.
If he'd have died, I could have gone to prison, there's no question. And somehow, in some strange way, it seemed so incredibly unfair. Because up to that point in my life, I was easygoing and popular, you know what I mean? And then, and I was after that, because his folks forgave me. His folks got in, well, not only forgave, but they did everything they could to excuse the act. I mean, they saved my neck. His parents. Wow. It's kind of extraordinary because when they heard what he was doing, they were appalled. Yeah. And they said, well, I can see perhaps how something like that could happen. I'm not saying it was appropriate. I'm not trying to justify it, but I'm saying is that there was, for some reason, that was the best I could do at that point in my in my life. Okay. For example, in our system, and we may not have time to really discuss this. In fact, we probably roll over. I can't believe our time is going so quickly. There's something going on in our judicial and penal system that I'd like to address. Not the fact that we can solve anything, but to start a thought, an idea. And it's pretty exciting, and I've talked about it with people in that, quote, industry who got tears in their eyes and said, well, yes, but, and, you know? So, yeah, we're going to have to go along with some chit-chat here and wait to do this. And one very important issue, number 4, we'll talk about next week. And I mean, the whole world wants to hear this one. The whole world seems somehow to be inept and ineffective in this one. And we've got some tools here that can really make all the difference, that really empties the wheelbarrow. Really empties it. Do you have any questions or comments?
Well, I'm looking forward to next week, Bern. I'm not going to be able to sleep till I find out what the 4th item is on your list. But I think that certainly people have a desire to have authority in their lives.
Oh. Yeah, this whole effort is to assist people in recapturing their authority and elevating their esteem, which will give them more initiative perhaps than they've ever had. You see, we talk in terms of this not being the land of the free and home of the brave, because we've been diminished. Okay, and what I'm saying is let's get it back, because you can take a whole room full of people who are in control and have nothing but chaos, and a whole room full of people in command and have nothing but harmony. And so this is what we're working toward. Got some interesting stuff coming up. If people would like to have a cassette tape of this week, all they need to do is call 1-800-661-3490. Once again, that's 1-800-661-3490. And my name is Bern
Moses.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Bern.
We'll look forward to next week. That's right.